Archaeologists have discovered the tomb of an ancient sorcerer, revealed the secret of the mystical Hand of Glory, and told what could be bought for 1,000 copper coins in antiquity. Random finds by amateur archaeologists and much more you will see in this video if you watch it to the end. Hi friend, you're on the KirTop channel. The oldest inscription in Cyrillic. Imagine you're digging in the ground and you come across something very old. What would you do? But the scientists who recently worked in the ruins of a fortress in Bulgaria were simply delighted. They found a breastplate that is over 1,100 years old. Can you imagine how many years ago that was? And what's especially interesting is that the breastplate has an inscription on it, and it may be the oldest example of Cyrillic, one of the written alphabets we use today. This inscription is engraved on a lead plate. I think someone wore it on their chest to ward off all troubles and evil. This inscription mentions two people, Pavel and Dmitry. Who they are, no one knows for sure. Perhaps Dmitry served in the fortress and Pavel was his relative. Apparently, this inscription was made during the reign of Tsar Simeon I, who ruled Bulgaria from 893 to 927. Most likely, the plate got into the fortress between 916 and 927. Prior to this, the oldest texts in Cyrillic were those that were written in 921, so this bib is something special. Perhaps scientists will soon learn more about it. Did you know that the Cyrillic alphabet originated from the Greek alphabet and additional letters were added to it for those sounds that were not in the Greek language? Cyrillic is used in many countries of Eastern Europe as well as in Central and North Asia. It was first adopted in Bulgaria as the official alphabet. Treasure with 1,000 coins. The story happened in Poland, where a resident named Michał Lotysz, using a metal detector, was looking for parts of a tractor on a farm. However, what he found made him very happy. It was a jug with coins from the 17th century. The treasure was found near the small village of Zaniówka in eastern Poland, not far from the borders with Belarus and Ukraine. Judging by the place of discovery, archaeologists believe that they buried it purposefully around the second half of the 17th century. As I said earlier, the search for ancient artifacts with a metal detector is not allowed in all countries. For example, in Poland, it is considered illegal. Therefore, a local resident immediately turned to archaeologists who have permission to conduct excavations. In total, the jar contained 1,000 copper coins. We often hear that archaeologists find 500 coins, 1,000 and 10,000, but we often do not understand whether this is a lot or not. In this situation, archaeologists were helped by historical documents from the 17th century. Thus, the researchers were able to roughly calculate what could be bought with these coins before. In fact, a jug filled with copper coins is not such a large amount of money. In the 17th century, they could buy 2 pairs of shoes or perhaps 20 gallons of beer. Ancient bakery in Armenia. I will tell you about an amazing discovery which is like from a fairy tale. Imagine an old bakery, a place where they bake delicious rolls and bread. Now imagine that this bakery is not on the corner of your street but in Armenia. And it is not 10, not 50 or even 100 years old. It is 3,000 years old. Do you believe that bags of flour that were hidden in the ground are still preserved in it? Archaeologists have found this bakery in Matsamor, Armenia, in the remains of a huge building that once housed ovens that unfortunately burned down in a fire. But the most amazing thing is that there were still bags of flour. They looked like ash stains, but the scientists tested them and now they are sure that this is flour. At first, the building was a public place, but then ovens were placed there and it became a bakery where people baked bread from wheat flour. Later, there was a fire and the building collapsed. Only the stone bases of the columns and charred fragments of wooden beams and roof sheathing remained. It is interesting that the flour in those days was used for divinatory purposes. Perhaps this bakery had some special meaning for the people of that time. This is still a mystery, but we hope that scientists will be able to solve it too. So guys, the next time you eat freshly baked bread, remember that bakeries were an important part of the life of our ancestors already 3,000 years ago. Semiprecious stones in the sewers. Right under our feet in the English city of Carlisle, archaeologists have discovered amazing ancient treasures from the time of the Roman Empire. Just think, exactly on the spot where the British now play cricket, once there were large pools of Roman bath. These baths were very popular among soldiers and their wives who lived in the 3rd century. Do you know what our archaeologist friends found in the drainage channels of these baths? They found a whole collection of semi-precious stones that seemed to have accidentally fallen and were lost in the seething waters of the bath. Imagine, these baths were like royal palaces, big enough to accommodate 1,000 soldiers and their wives. It's time to dig, and here's what archaeologists found. Hundreds of glass beads, dozens of women's hairpins, ancient coins, and of course, these amazing stones. A total of 36 were found. These were small but very beautiful stones carved from amethyst, jasper, and other semi-precious minerals. Each of them depicted various Roman gods and goddesses. But the question remains, how did these decorations get into the bath drainage system? In ancient Rome, people loved to wear rings with beautiful gemstones. However, these stones were kept on the rings thanks to a special glue, which unfortunately could weaken in hot water. And so, while the Romans enjoyed their bath, the stones probably simply fell out of the rings and fell into the sewer. But then why didn't they just leave the decorations at home, you may ask? Good question! In ancient Roman bath, before entering the pool, people took off their clothes, remaining only in special sandals. Some people hired servants to look after their belongings, but there weren't many of them. In most cases, the attendants of the bath watched over the stuff. However, there were occasional thefts, and some Romans decided to take the risk of taking all their valuables with them to the bath. And it seems that some of them have been lost forever, leaving us with magnificent artifacts to study and admire. Perhaps under our feet, there are mysterious jewelry of antiquity, which one of you will definitely discover someday. Write in the comments if you dreamed of finding a treasure of precious coins or ancient treasures, and be sure to tell us what was the most valuable thing you found throughout your life. Also, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Ancient Roman treasure in the Swiss Alps. Someone comes to Switzerland just to relax and have a good time in the mountains, and some people are even luckier. Between the mountain peaks Ammertenhorn and Wildstrubel, the traveler accidentally stumbled upon a coin sticking out of the ground. As a law-abiding citizen, he immediately turned to archaeologists. During excavations, researchers found many other artifacts here. So far, the team has found 100 coins, 27 small rock crystals, 59 shoe nails, a brooch, and a fragment of a votive tablet. And all these artifacts date back to Roman rule. The Romans lived throughout the territory of modern Switzerland, but scientists did not expect to find a treasure at an altitude of 2,950 meters. Archaeologists often find coins and small artifacts all over Switzerland, but finding such a huge amount at once, moreover so high, is a rarity. Such a remote location of the treasure suggests that this place could have had a great religious significance. 20 kilometers away is the city of Thun, where the ruins of several Roman temples were found. In one of them, archaeologists found an inscription that mentions female alpine deities. Most likely, the mountains really had a religious significance, which is also hinted at by rock crystals found next to coins and jewelry. Ancient skull comb. Today, combs are made from a wide variety of materials: plastic, metal, or wood. But in the Iron Age in England, combs were made from human skulls. At least one such find was discovered by archaeologists during the construction of a highway in Bar Hill. The comb was found in 2018, but only now scientists have told about the results of their study. At first glance, it seems that there is nothing unusual in it, but the material of its production, to put it mildly, shocked archaeologists. It was a human skull. But scientists did not find traces of use on the comb. This means that they did not comb their hair with the comb, but most likely used it as an amulet. A hole was also found on it, possibly for a thread or rope. Probably the amulet was created from the skull of an important person who was revered in the Iron Age even after death. There is an assumption that these could be the remains of a relative. Interestingly, this is the third such comb found. In the 70s of the last century and in 2000, the same ones were already found, and also not far from Bar Hill. Most likely in this region during the Iron Age, this was a common practice, what people did not invent in ancient times to protect themselves from evil spirits. Pearl City on the island. On the territory of the United Arab Emirates, Archaeologists have made a sensational discovery. In the Persian Gulf on the island of Sinia, researchers have found an ancient pearl city. In the pre-Islamic period in the 6th century, thousands of people lived here. The main occupation of the inhabitants of this city was the collection of pearl shells. Archaeologists have found millions of shells on the island. They still crunch underfoot. On the island, name of which means flashing light, archaeologists previously discovered an ancient Christian monastery dating back 1,400 years. The city is located directly south of the monastery and covers an area of about 12 hectares. Archaeologists have unearthed a variety of stone and lime mortar houses here, ranging from cramped quarters to larger houses with patios. In the houses, archaeologists found both scattered small pearls and diving weights, with the help of which divers descended to the seabed holding their breath. Pearl mining flourished until the beginning of the 20th century, but after the First World War, people learned how to extract artificial pearls. Since then, on the island, you can see a million pearl shells that just lay around under your feet. Remains of 2 men in Pompeii. And one more story from the ancient city of Pompeii, where a new unique discovery was made. Archaeologists have found the remains of 2 men who scientists believe died during the terrible eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 AD. The skeletons were found under the collapsed wall, and apparently these people were adults, about 50 years old. Anthropologists carefully examined the bones and concluded that they died when the building where they tried to hide from the volcanic eruption collapsed on them. One of them even managed to raise his hand to protect himself from falling debris. In the same room where the remains were found, archaeologists found beads from a necklace and several ancient coins. This will help scientists learn even more about how people lived in those days. Now imagine that Mount Vesuvius, which seemed to be just a beautiful mountain scenery, suddenly erupts, throwing hot lava and poisonous gases into the air. The city of Pompeii, where more than 20,000 people lived, was completely buried under a layer of ash and stones. Most people managed to leave the city before the eruption, but about 2,000 people died. The great eruption of Vesuvius lasted only 17 minutes, but those 17 minutes changed the history of the city forever. Roman sorcerer's tomb. Archaeologists are already difficult to scare and surprise with something, but this find discovered in the ancient city of Sagalassus was an exception. They found an unusual cremation burial, twice sealed and studded with curved nails. People in ancient times thus wanted to save the world of the living from the dead buried here. Who it was and why they tried to hide it even up to death, you will learn further. Sagalassus was founded at the end of the 5th century BC when the region was part of the Achaemenid Empire, and by the 2nd century BC it had become quite an important urban center of the Hellenistic kingdom of Pergamon. In 25 BC, Octavian Augustus included it in the Roman province of Galatia, and this was the era of the highest prosperity of the city. The cremation burial was dated to 100–150 AD. The buried was an adult man who was cremated and left on the same fire. Archaeologists also noticed that no one touched the charred remains after burning. And this is already becoming interesting, because according to the ancient Roman practice of cremation, the ashes were usually collected in an urn and buried in a grave or placed in a tomb. But even this is not the strangest thing that the researchers noticed. Someone scattered 41 bent and twisted nails along the edges of the cremation fire. They could not be used for practical purposes. Their distribution around the perimeter of the fire indicates that the nails were placed there in some particular order. On top of the still smoldering fire, 24 large bricks were tightly laid. Then the bricks were covered with a thick layer of plaster. The result was a rather massive and well-sealed tomb. It is interesting that each of these practices was already met in ancient Rome: cremation and sealing the grave with bricks and even twisted nails. However, in our story, everything was used in one place. Most likely the buried was a dangerous person during his lifetime. Unfortunately, the remains of the burned man turned out to be unsuitable for DNA analysis. According to the principle of other burials of that period, archaeologists concluded that the buried was an ancient sorcerer. This is what frightened people when the sorcerer was alive, and caused such a fear that they decided to conduct a terrible burial ceremony with sealing the grave. Rate this video with a thumbs up, tell your friends about it, and subscribe to the channel, and I will definitely answer every kind comment. Thanks for your views, bye everyone!